We've got a ton of Apple products that are coming out in the next couple months, and you know what that means? There's also a ton of Apple products on the chopping block. And in today's video, we're going to be speculating on what exactly is going to be discontinued within the next couple months. It's probably the longest list that we've had in a while. Let's begin. I figured we'd start with the iPhones, because that's all most people really care about. But it's also probably the most interesting one, because Apple, for a while now, has been discontinuing the higher-end, Pro line of iPhones. Even before we had Pro terminology with our iPhones, they discontinued the iPhone X, not even a year after it was announced. Same thing with the XS, but they did keep around the XR for a few years, and they're still selling it now. I think that at $499, it's pretty much gotten as cheap as it can possibly get. So more than likely it's gonna get axed next month, and then the price point of the iPhone 11 will come down a bit further to $499. And finally, Apple can be at peace because all of the Apple logos in the iPhone lineup will be centered. XR is the last frickin' one that has to have iPhone written on the back, and that just throws off everything, and I can't stand it. So I'm glad XR is probably on its way out. I do think the iPhone SE is gonna stick around for the rest of this year. It will likely get replaced by a identical SE that just so happens to have 5G now early next year, maybe in March. But by the end of this year, you'll still be able to buy same old SE. But the real question comes down to, will the iPhone 12 and 12 mini get discontinued? Because Apple typically keeps around, their entry-level flagship model, but I think we all know that the iPhone 13, other than that camera arrangement on the back being now diagonal instead of stoplight configuration, it's gonna be kind of weird to keep both of those around, and I'm not sure, with their OLED displays and their 5G modems, if Apple is even comfortable lowering the prices on the 12 and 12 minis. So my prediction, could be wrong here, is that Apple is not going to keep around any of the iPhone 12 series. Not only are they discontinuing the 12 Pro and the 12 Pro Max, but they're also going to be axing the 12 and 12 mini because the 13 lineup is an S year, it's too dang similar, and Apple is fine keeping around their LCD, rounded off chassis iPhone 11 for people who want to buy an older iPhone for cheaper. There's your demographic for those who just need, an iPhone that works and it covers the basics. But I honestly think that the 12 and 12 mini would compete too closely with the 13 and 13 mini, and they would have way too much in common, and there's probably just not much of a price reduction that can be done. Although I'll admit, it'd be very, very interesting if they kept them around. If you reduce the price of the 12 or 12 mini by $100, how would those sell right next to phones that are very similar but just a bit more expensive, slightly better battery life, slightly better camera, just an S year next to the old year? Apple has done that in the past, but my guess is to simplify the lineup further, they're just gonna axe all of the iPhone 12s. When it comes to the Apple Watch though, I'm really, really hoping this is the year we kill off the Series 3, okay? Apple has been selling this thing since September of 2017. They've been selling this since before the iMac Pro came out, and they're still selling it now. Granted, it's very cheap, and probably that price point of $199 is the only reason they want to keep selling the Series 3s, just so they can literally put everywhere Apple Watch starting at $199, because that's technically where the new ones start. But the CPU is quite old, and I know it doesn't really matter because our watches aren't using Final Cut much, but when it comes to longevity and how many years of software support watchOS is able to provide, I'm really concerned that the Series 3 is going to get cut off next year. I'm surprised it didn't get cut off this year, and selling watches that are not going to get software support within the next 2 years is very unlike Apple. So unless they have some grand scheme of watchOS being supported on the Series 3 for many, many more years to come, then I say you should scrap the Series 3 because it looks dated now. And we're also about to get the Series 7, which is supposed to look way cooler, way more modern with the squared off edge design and having a larger display and thinner bezels all the way around. And we already have the SE, which personally I don't think Apple needs to upgrade. I don't think they're going to discontinue it, but actually my hope is that they would lower the price on it, maybe more to $199. But I honestly think that's the Apple Watch most people should get. I turn off the always on display on my watch pretty much every other month, and I don't think people really use the blood oxygen sensor or the ECG that regularly. It's cool, but at the end of the day, a doctor is supposed to give you actual medical advice and information, and the watch is like, by the way, I never check for heart attacks, and you should, seek medical help if you're not feeling well. So the health sensors are cool and all, but I think for everyday people, the SE is just the perfect Apple Apple Watch, and it's at a great price point, but do we need the dated Series 3 design and, you know, the updated SE design, and now also the brand new futuristic Series 7 design to be in the lineup all at once? I don't really think so. So I'm okay with the Series 3 getting kicked out and the SE getting a price reduction, but also, yes, you should probably expect the Series 6 to get discontinued, just like the 4 and the 5 got discontinued a year after they launched, so I don't see the 6 really being an exception. Although, if you do love the product red or the dark blue Series 6, keep your eyes peeled on the certified refurbished page, because that's typically where Apple Watches go after they stop being produced, and you can usually get some pretty good deals on them there, so keep your eyes peeled. When it comes to the iPad lineup, we've gotten quite a few updates on them in the past few years, but because we're expecting a refreshed, you know, iPad 9 with a larger display and thinner chassis, alongside the most exciting iPad of the year, the Mini 6, I think it's reasonable to assume iPad Mini 5. Thank goodness that dated home button and lightning design that was still $400, that can go away. I don't really have that much of an issue with the price point. It's just the design for the iPad Mini has been unchanged since the beginning, and I'm really excited for the iPad Mini to finally look different and for that small forehead and chin and home button layout. Also, the home button was also awkwardly placed on all the iPad Minis. I don't know why, but it just didn't look like it fit right in the middle, so I'm glad they're getting rid of that. I expect the Mini 5 to be discontinued within the next couple months, and that will mean that the iPad 9 we're getting soon will be the only iPad in the lineup that still has a lightning connector and still has a home button. Other than that, the rest of the iPad lineup will be all in on this squared off, flat edge design with no home button and somewhat thin bezels, not to mention no headphone jack across the entire lineup, again, except for the $300 model. So I kind of like the hardware here because I'm a big fan of the 2018 iPad Pro, and basically since then, Apple is just working on bringing that type of design and that type of hardware to more of the lineup, and the iPad Mini is absolutely deserving of it. So I can't wait to try that one out myself. The iPad lineup should look ever so clean by the end of this year. I can't wait for Apple to update the website, you know, the little compare icon. I want that to be a thin bezel for every screen size. You'll have an 8.3-inch iPad with all thin bezels and a 10.9-inch iPad with thin bezels and then 12.9-inch iPad. Oh man, it's just gonna look so futuristic and modern and clean. No chins, no white bezels to be found anywhere. So that's gonna be marvelous. Now when it comes to the Mac department, I'm really hoping that we can say goodbye to pretty much any Intel laptop from Apple. Sure, we're not going to be done with this whole Intel transition by the end of this year. I still think we're going to have to wait on larger size iMac until the spring, and the Mac Pro is by far going to be last. I actually think there's a pretty decent chance of Apple selling an Intel Mac Pro alongside an Apple Silicon Mac Pro, one that's really customizable and modular, and the other one that's not customizable at all, but the performance is way better for the money. As for the end of this year, though, I'm anticipating all of the MacBooks to be over to Apple Silicon, which means that yes, the 4-port MacBook Pro with 13-inch display, that'll be gone and replaced by the 14-inch mini LED M1X MacBook Pro. And of course, same exact story with the 16-inch MacBook Pro. Right now, it's still gorgeous, but it has not been updated in almost 2 years. And I'm surprised that Apple didn't even have little Intel upgrades to provide along the way with that Mac. But I expect the Touch Bar to pretty much be gone on all of those higher-end MacBook Pros. I'm kind of confused on how long Apple is planning on keeping around the 2-port MacBook Pro with just the M1 chip. I know a lot of people enjoy that Mac, and it's probably the best Mac you can get if you're a diehard Touch Bar fan, but does it make sense, since it's coming up on its first birthday, for Apple to kind of phase that one out and replace it with a 14-inch MacBook Pro with mini LED? I like the M1X part, and I like the mini LED part, but I don't like the idea of the Touch Bar officially being killed off, and I think it would be nice for Apple to keep around that little M1 MacBook Pro for those who want it, but simultaneously, isn't it gonna be kind of weird if Apple has 3 sizes for the MacBook Pro to choose from? Because we're pretty confident in all of these rumors about a 14-inch model with the Liquid Retina XDR display, but we also aren't really hearing much about Apple stopping production of the 13-inch MacBook Pro with the M1 chip. Personally, because the M1 chip performance is so similar between the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro, I don't really think we need a 2-port MacBook Pro. I'd be okay if all of the MacBook Pros had the updated I/O with more ports than the MacBook Air, and that could just be a selling point of a Pro product is more ports and better battery life, better performance, and that type of thing. So this is one of those wildcard options that I'm not really sure about, and because I don't think Apple likes the idea of having 3 different sizes of the MacBook Pro, I know they've done it in the past, but they didn't want to keep all 3 sizes around. Typically, Apple was fine with just having a smaller one and a bigger one, so that's why I'm gonna go out on a limb here and guess that by November, Apple's going to get rid of the M1 MacBook Pro and just have M1X MacBook Pros moving forward. It would clean up the lineup a lot more. It would be a lot less confusing for customers, I think, to be like, okay, wait, the 13-inch MacBook Pro doesn't have mini LED, but it does have a touch bar, but these bigger ones don't have touch bars, and they do have mini LED, and they have faster chips and more ports. Like, it's just gonna be a really confusing lineup if they keep it, so that's why I'm suggesting 1 year after they launched it, they're gonna scrap it, which sounds a little bit weird for a MacBook Pro, but when Apple's ready to get rid of a standard, they usually get rid of it pretty quickly. Just like the butterfly keyboard, within a year it was all gone, and I think we might see something similar with the touch bar, because they're clearly wanting to move away from that with the larger MacBooks. But yeah, I actually think by the end of this year, the 27-inch iMac will still be rocking Intel, and by the end of this year, the cheese grater Mac Pro will still be $50,000 or more. I don't think they're going to be discontinuing those anytime soon. But are there any last-minute guesses you guys have for products that Apple may be phasing out by the end of this year? Don't forget AirPods 2. Those are likely going away if we're getting AirPods 3 next month, so you might have to say goodbye to the old traditional AirPods with their longer stems. Those could be gone, or who knows, maybe Apple will kill off the iPod Touch by the end of this year. They're still not doing much with it. It's still rocking the A10 chip that's underclocked, so is 2021 the year where they announce a bunch of new stuff and then quietly kill off the iPod so people don't really notice it's gone? But you know, a bunch of news agencies are still going to cover it. Apple silently killed the iPod Touch, but I don't care if your kids or certain businesses or waiters or something use iPods. I've never seen that happen. Kids just use their parents' old iPhones these days, and businesses use iPads for signatures and touch interfaces, so I don't really see the point in keeping the iPod around, but I think Apple's just worried of the headlines that would create, and it's too much nostalgia for them, so they feel like they have to keep it around. But feel free to let me know what you guys think will be discontinued by the end of this year. This is your Alp Sheep here. I'll see you guys in the next one.